Light pollution news, January 2026, 0.68%. We're kicking the new year off right, and that's with some good old light pollution news. Today, I'm joined by Princia's Rushil Kukreja, Circadian Rhythm researcher Randy Nelson, and electrical engineer and advocate Scott Lind. This episode, what did we learn when France decided to turn off its streetlights? Dark sky festivals can inspire more than admiration. They can inspire action. And where exactly should you put your bed at night? All this and more this episode. Welcome to Light Pollution News. This is the first show of the new year. I'm your host, Bill McGeaney, and I want to welcome both our longtime listeners and anyone new for the first time. We do this show twice a month and cover all the happenings in our nighttime world. Light Pollution News is a listener-supported show, which relies solely on the support of you at home to get us by. If you're currently a supporter, thank you. I sent this message out to our supporters and is here for general consumption. Supporters currently are funding 2/3 of our technical costs and about half of our overall costs. Your efforts help us grow. They help us cover our monthly bills, including a range of software that we use, web hosting, podcast server hosting, show editing. Really, there's a wide variety of things that it helps us cover, and it is crucial, and we really, really appreciate it. Light Pollution News is a process. The show kicks off at the beginning of the month, and we build up to what you hear today, largely over 3 weeks worth of effort and labor. And then we have social media on top of it that thankfully we have a couple of great volunteers who have stepped up. So we have a little team of social media that's starting to work on building some great stuff for you. If you like what we do, why not support the show? You can learn more by heading over to our website and clicking on the support the show link. And if you're already a supporter, thank you. Thank you. You literally keep us going. Lastly, if you hear anything you like or you don't like, why not share? You can always find all of the show links and show summaries, show walkthroughs over on the website. I make that really easy for you guys. I want to make sure if anyone has questions about material, they see something that we post on social media, they have any questions about anything here, take a look. Just take a look. Go over to the website, look on the episode page, and you'll see everything listed. You'll see an article list and then a summary, and then we'll actually have the show walkthrough. So if you hear something, you can kind of pinpoint where it was at and see the link that was associated with it. Very easy stuff. Try and make it as easy for you, the listener, to kind of follow up on your end as much as possible as it can be. Well, this is going to be a good one, friends. I have 3 guests here that I've been hoping to have on for quite some time. They're all folks that I've seen in the news relatively recently. Good things, of course, nothing bad, but I've been looking forward to getting them all 3 on the show, and here we have them all together. So why not start off the year with some people you've been hopeful for. First up, I want to welcome high school senior at the Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology, Mr. Rushil. I should ask this. Rushil, how do you say last name? Is it Kukreja? How do you say that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's Kukreja.
Kukreja? Mr. Rushil Kukreja. Rushil, you started the nonprofit Princia, and you currently serve as the president. And we'll dive a little more into Princia at the start of the second show this month. But for now, Rushil, welcome to Light Pollution News. Are you on winter break yet?
Yeah, winter break actually just started yesterday for us.
Well, that's great news. You're a senior. Where are we going to college,
Yes,
man?
that's right. Don't know yet. Still kind of waiting out the next few months.
All right, I won't push you on that. But congratulations, you're halfway there. Also with me today is an electrical engineer from the great state of Wisconsin. And Matt, you guys had a great football game yesterday. Unfortunately, it went the wrong way, but
I'm trying to forget about that when I read you, Bill.
my Eagles lost to the Bears as well, so it's understandable. So you have over 35 years of experience designing sustainable and reliable electrical systems for commercial, industry, public facilities. You're licensed as a professional engineer in Alaska and Wisconsin. You're a lead AP and currently hold a master electrician license and commercial electrical inspector license in Wisconsin. And you're the owner of Redshift Electrical, which I feel like we're going to be talking about a little bit, which focuses solely on providing responsible outdoor lighting solutions. Scott, welcome to the show. Scott Lind, that is. How are you doing, man?
Yeah, doing great. Thank you. Glad to be here.
I want to clarify for you at home, did you ever Google Redshift Electrical? Because it's not the first one that comes up, but the first thing that comes up is Alta Redshift, which makes some pretty nasty electric motorcycles. It's pretty cool. You can go down a YouTube rabbit hole there. So,
Yeah, I don't know if any of them still exist. They haven't been in business for a couple of years, I think, at least. But I don't know. I'm assuming some of their products are still out there.
yeah, well, they still have great YouTube videos you can watch.
Okay.
Oh, man, I didn't realize that they went out of business. Well, yeah. So Redshift Electric, what is this? What is the plan here? What is the service that you offer?
It was really started solely for the purpose of being able to legally do electrical work that I do in Wisconsin. I got my master electrician's license solely for volunteer work many, many years ago. And then when I wanted to be able to install fixtures, I needed liability insurance. And so I started the company solely so that I could be a contractor in the state of Wisconsin. But it doesn't make any money. It's not intended to make any money. It's all just, I pass everything I buy through a cost. My labor is volunteer, with rare exceptions when something else has to be done associated with lighting that wasn't part of the original scope, and I agree to do it. Otherwise, it's really just to be selling and installing, I'll say, dark sky fixtures, right? Outdoor lighting that's low CCT, appropriately controlled, zero up light, etc.
And has there been a good reception to that? I guess I assume that there's a curve that's happened over time on this.
Well, I started the business 3 years ago, and I thought that I'd have some pushback from people when I started installing these fixtures. I sold these fixtures to them almost exclusively on energy savings. I talked about the positive impacts, but they bought into it solely because of the cost. I'll do it for free. I'll install it for free. You're buying fixtures at cost, and you'll save a lot of energy. I am installing selectable color temperature fixtures. They go as high as 2,700K, but they start at 1,800K. I installed those because I felt like I had very low risk, but I assumed I'd have to adjust dimming levels for people, adjust color temperature. That has not had to happen at all anywhere with anything I've installed. So it's been amazing to me that the acceptance has been 100% so far.
And what kind of facilities are we talking about here?
2 fire stations, 2 parks, a campground, library, church, wastewater plant, a large natural reserve area with a visitor center, other outdoor buildings. Yeah, I mean, a fairly wide variety, a senior housing facility, kind of a wide variety of buildings.
That's great. All right, moving on to my third guest. With me is Mr. Randy Nelson, the professor and chair in the Department of Neuroscience at West Virginia University. Dr. Nelson is also the Hazel Ruby McQueen Chair for Neurological Research and the executive director of the WVU Center for Foundational Neuroscience Research and Education, and the director of basic research for the Rockefeller Neuroscience Institute. He has been studying a topic that's been very important to you listening at home, and that is sleep and circadian rhythms. Dr. Nelson has published over 500 papers and over 12 books on biological rhythms. He studies the effects of disrupted circadian rhythms on the immune system, neuroinflammation, metabolism, sleep, and mood. Dr. Randy, welcome to Light Pollution News. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for inviting me.
I know you're from California originally, right? Is that?
I went to school in California. I grew up in northeastern Ohio.
Oh, that's right, Ohio. That's right. I feel like a lot of people always, that's the path. They find their way out of Ohio and everywhere else. You're not a Browns fan probably then.
Yeah, I am. Sadly. And yeah, it's been a long slog.
It's a long time, right?
Yeah.
Well, Randy, how did you end up doing this line of research? Circadian rhythms, was this a thing years ago? Did people care about it?
People have cared about it more and more. I would say, it's a field that really got started in the 60s, frankly. It got a name, chronobiology or biochronometry. So it's not a particularly ancient field in biology. I did a PhD with Irv Zucker, who was the person who discovered where the primary circadian clock was in the brain. At Berkeley, everybody in the lab, there were a dozen graduate students were studying circadian rhythms. And I said, I want to do something else. So I started working on seasonal rhythms because I didn't really want to ever finish, and you need several seasons. So that's how I started. But I switched back to circadian rhythms about 20 years ago or so.
And since you've traveled down the road, have you seen any changes in attitudes? Did people buy into the idea that certain environmental aspects could affect circadian rhythms? I guess let me rephrase that. People outside of the sciences, did they buy into that initially, or how did that evolve, I guess?
I would say circadian rhythms are one of the most fundamental biological processes that everybody ignores. So just to give an easy example, there are ideal times to take medications, right? So for example, you should take blood pressure medication at night. You should take your anti-cholesterol medication in the evening before you go to sleep. That's because you make cholesterol at night. Physicians know that. And if I sort of confront them, hey, why don't you tell them to take it at night? Most people take it in the morning. They say, I'm just glad they're taking it. And so I think there's widespread, including myself, right, ignoring of these biological rhythms. And we can talk more about that later, about how fundamental these rhythms are and why people pay not as much attention as they probably should for optimal health.
Well, we'll get into that definitely in a little bit. Rushil, I forgot to ask you, are you an NFL fan?
I don't really follow football now.
Yeah, it's understandable. You're in the DC area?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, that makes sense. I understand. It's not, there hasn't been much to follow. It's just like in Cleveland for quite a long time.
Right, yeah.
Okay, well, why don't we kick things off tonight? Always put in these warm-up articles in here because they're fun. New York City christened a new tower, a really cool new tower out there. The building, which is home to JP Morgan Chase, is their corporate headquarters, sits at 1,388 feet tall. And according to the New York Times, shoots out like a gargantuan lighthouse. The lighthouse effect derives from an estimated 20,000 LEDs that are used to create a visual artboard towering out of the forest of these skyscrapers. And if you haven't seen the videos, it's quite ostentatious, borderline dystopian, depends on which view you like, though many have embraced its visual displays as adding to the diversity of the New York City skyline. The tower's upper third is essentially lit up to have some object, color, or otherwise designish looking thing that's going on. Judging by the videos on TikTok and Reddit, it's not dim, not in the slightest, and is designed to be visible from much of the five boroughs. The building, which cost an estimated $3 billion to erect, may be subject to 2020 New York City Energy Conservation Code, which states that facade lighting must be turned off between midnight to 6 a.m. Although I couldn't find any sources on that. That was just an assumption, I believe, that came out of the New York Times article. I'll give the architects some points here in attempting something artistic. It's not a building that simply lights up like a beacon at night, nor is it one that puts on ridiculous LED strips horizontally and vertically and blazes out like some stupid video game for no apparent reason. Rather, this building has many well thought out lighting specific displays, I guess is the best way to put it, which is very vague, but it's, you have to see it. So I'm curious, what is everyone's thoughts on this new building that we have up in New York City?
Well, I mean, I'm obviously not a fan of adding unnecessary light at night for any reason, right? Even for art, unless it's very short term. So I'm not a fan of having a building that's obviously spent enormous amounts of money solely for the purpose to light up the sky at night. That'd be my take on it. Art, better art than just blinking or racing lights or not. That still seems like an unnecessary intrusion onto darkness.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it also becomes kind of an issue of just like normalization. I mean, if you normalize this building, that sets up a precedent that you can just like put up as many lights as you want without kind of thinking about the environmental or the human health harm that those lights might have.
I agree with both folks. And I was in Manhattan 2 weeks ago visiting my youngest son, and I saw it, and he pointed out, and we went to Brooklyn for dinner, and he says, look, you can see it from here. I go, oh yeah, I think you can see it from space. It's pretty bright. It makes a statement, clearly, but do we need it? I don't know if it went out or not. I was back in the hotel by 10, but it's an awful lot of energy being burned off for no real good reason. And I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of dead birds at the base of that building after the next migration season because they get attracted to those lights. And, it's particularly tall. I mean, it's very tall and where it's at.
Well, that's a great point. I wonder if they are going to be in part of Lights Out, right? Because it is such a bright building. But what about if the lights are extinguished at midnight? Is there anything wrong with letting people just enjoy the building and then provide the lights go out at midnight? It's kind of like, what's a big deal?
Yeah, I guess I would say that we don't understand enough yet about the timing impacts for a lot of species. So even though being off in the middle of the night sounds like an obvious way to make the problem less severe, because of the behavior of species, there could be a lot of species that are impacted by that light Of course, any light in the city, but especially we're going to, like you pointed out, we're going to add more light to the city that would be impacted a lot between when it gets dark and midnight.
I agree, Scott. It's a very, I guess, strict interpretation of night, right? Okay, well, since we broached this one, I thought this was going to be a nice segue into your story, Scott, because we're talking about, lighting buildings. And I know here you have a story that you suggested that was looking at 2025 and 2024 in France. The community starts switching off some streetlights. And there was even an article that we talked about on here previously where the users could actually have a phone app and they could turn lights on as needed in their town. I forget which town that was in France. The piece, which is from Sarima, is switching off public lighting, a study on local authority practices. Why don't you tell me a little more about this piece here? Why did you find this interesting?
Well, the fascinating thing to me was they looked at, I think it was roughly 19,000 communities in France that turned off their lighting starting in 2014, I think was the earliest dates they talked about. And of those 19,000, 15,000 practiced total extinction, not dimming, totally off from like midnight to 6 a.m., whatever the hours were in the middle of the night. To me, the number that jumped out at me was the 131 communities have decided to turn them back on. 131 out of 19,000. That's 0.68%. So my takeaway on that is 19,000 municipalities turned off their lights, 15,000 of them turned them off entirely, and only 131 decided there were consequences to doing that would encourage them to turn them back on again. I mean, that to me, it's a huge research project in the impacts of turning lights off in the middle of the night to humanity. If there were huge impacts in crime, huge impacts in automobile accidents, pedestrian accidents in these places that had turned off the lights, I'd have to imagine more than 0.68% would have turned them back on. That to me was the most telling number of the whole thing. And I experienced it firsthand because we just happened to be in France in October. And when I saw this thing come out, we changed our plans and traveled to one of these areas that turns them off. We were in Avon, south of Paris. And at midnight, the lights went out. And we were in a residential area of apartment blocks, and there were no, like shop windows with any kind of stray light coming down to the street. So literally the street got black. It went dark at midnight. And you could instantly see the stars. It was an amazing experience to actually be there and see it in person. So, yeah, it was just the fact that they only a tiny fraction have turned it back on. That was the key thing for me.
What was the kind of vibe there at night? Did people go out, or what were people doing? I guess this is probably, what time of day was it?
Because of the train schedules, and the train schedules were late, obviously, the train schedules were late getting out of Paris, but we didn't arrive there until about 10:30 p.m., I think. And we walked from the bus station to our Airbnb, which is about a half-hour walk, and we were the only ones out in the street. Street lights were on still at that point, but the streets were quiet. We were walking through residential areas of apartments, and there weren't people out in those areas. Now, we weren't in the municipal area, the bar, restaurant area, that evening. So I can't speak to what they were doing in those kind of areas, but in the residential areas, the streets were empty except for us, essentially, right?
Said you were there with your wife?
Yep.
How did she feel about walking down streets in the dark?
No problem at all for her. Yeah. In fact, she is the kind of person that we live in a very, very rural area, but she walks at night all the time with no light whatsoever. And she has incredible night vision, which might be part of it. But even for a female, she has incredible night vision based on friends and family that have been out with us at night. So maybe that's the reason she feels comfortable. Yeah, she has no concerns about being out at night in the dark. So.
Yeah, I always feel that it's something that you get comfortable with, right? Because you rely on other senses. And I think for a lot of people, it's jarring to now be forced to rely on senses that they haven't necessarily attuned or haven't felt, right? They haven't actually used in quite a bit.
100%. That's been our experience where we live, because she actually leads night hikes in the state park next to us on a regular basis. And we have another woman in our organization that does the same thing. And just getting people comfortable with the idea that you can just leave your flashlight in your car. We don't need it, right? It's definitely a learned behavior, something to get comfortable with.
This story, I like it. And I asked about how it was when you walked through the community at night and what people were doing and whatnot, because quite the opposite went on in Canada, where if you've been, just like here in the US, Canada's done a big retrofit on most of their cities. I haven't been to Toronto per se, but I know how Montreal looks. I know how Calgary looks, and they're very bright streets. And there's a piece that came out of CBC that said that nightlife is trending downward in most major Canadian cities. And that doesn't jive with what I've been sold from a lot of the commerce associations here in the U.S., at least here in my town and here in the city of Philadelphia and in many areas that I've heard from in the state of Pennsylvania, is that, you need to have lighting, you need to have full lighting, you have constant lighting and a very bright lighting to get people out shopping and doing things, going to bars and stuff. You need that. You just need that. So why would it be going down if you have all this lighting? And obviously I know there's other factors in there, but Rushil, you're coming up on the age where you'll be, going to dinners and doing things, going to bars and whatnot. What do you think is going on here? Is this just a generational change?
I think it might in part be that, but I think the lighting is also does play a huge role. I think obviously lighting does matter at low levels, where if there's a street that's completely dim and poorly lit and there's no lights at all, that might discourage foot traffic to a certain point. But once you cross that very basic threshold, I don't think there'd be more night traffic from more illuminated kind of outdoor areas. I mean, we can't have our cities be warehouses where they're just completely lit up, because warehouses in the end, they're optimized for efficiency, not for happiness or for pleasure, for people to actually experience things. So I do think that at some point, just adding more lights as much as diminishing or even negative returns, where people aren't going to go out more just because there's more light, contrary to what a lot of people believe.
I think you made a great point there. You don't want to go out and party in a warehouse, or I guess
right.
In a warehouse a work setting, I guess is the best way to put it, right? Having a warmer light, maybe, a little toned down light might be more conducive, maybe. Randy, what are your thoughts on that? You think that, I know I saw your TED talk. I know you like to have a good time.
Wait, what?
So I hear about this, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's interesting. It depends on people's experiences, I would imagine. I mean, I only recently moved to West Virginia. I was at other universities in major cities, and it's very rural there. I don't know where y'all live, but this is rural. And, there's very little light out at night, and I can see the stars from our deck, and it's very nice. However, I had a colleague, his name comes up a lot in light at night studies, Abraham Haim from University of Haifa, and he couldn't believe how dark it was. And he's someone who studies the problems associated with light at night. But for him, having dark nights, living in Haifa, is a big security risk if it's dark. And so I think that affects, and even though he knows very well, he's written a lot about light at night in Tel Aviv having effects on various cancers and so on. This is very off-putting. It's very tense. It's okay. Trust me, it's okay. The worst thing's going to happen, a bear's coming over that fence, but having light ain't going to stop him.
Randy, did you grow up on the street with streetlights?
No.
Okay. Scott, did you?
No.
Rushil, did you?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I tend to find that people who didn't grow up with streetlights are more comfortable with having a nighttime without streetlights. It's just a little anecdotal thought there. Obviously, Rushil is bucking that trend for me right now. So there's that. Well, there's a good transition piece that I came across on social media this week. Via Philadelphia Inquirer, my neighbor's Christmas light shines into my bedroom. What should I do? And the editors put the onus of responsibility right on the person who wrote in, saying that, just close your shades and put on some eye masks and you'll be fine. Stop complaining. It's holidays and everyone should be excited that you have blazing lights going through your window. So instead of turning off your lights at 10 p.m. and being considerate, which I assume is not what happened here because the person wrote in, they probably wouldn't be complaining if it was, not 12 a.m. and they're getting lights blasted into the room. There's this constant shaming thing going on. Why do we tell people who have light shining through their rooms to toughen up and get over it, but then we condemn noise nuisances?
Well, I gave a presentation a couple of years ago, and I used the term light trespass, and one of the people there said that's a really interesting term that he'd never heard before, and he made the exact analogy you just did, that if my neighbor had a barking dog, or the neighborhood was being, assaulted by barking dogs regularly, right? The neighbor was complaining, that's the nuisance. We have to do something about that dog. He said, I'd never thought about it being the same way for light. So I think it is, in general, people accepting the fact that light at night in a town is a positive thing for the general public, and they assume it's a positive thing, and therefore people who are against the positive thing are the ones that are at fault. I think that's where it comes from.
Right. I think like culturally, we have this like sense that like light is associated with like celebration and just like safety in general. And people really don't know as much about the negative consequences of light as well. And I think if people are more exposed to the harms that light pollution can do as well, and light trespass can do, I think that would be extremely consequential in actually getting people to stop like victim blaming in a sense about light pollution. Like rather than telling people to just like close their blinds, or I guess an equivalent of that would be like telling people just wear like earplugs if there's like noise coming, which doesn't like really make sense, and it doesn't do anything to address the actual problem.
Yeah. Why don't we just tell people to thicken their walls? I don't understand. It's definitely victim blaming, without a doubt. But why not? If you build a fortress, you won't be able to hear anything, and that's all you need to do. As we jump into the next article, which is going to start getting into some health stuff here, I have an assignment for you at home. Tonight, stand in your bedroom with the lights off, shades open, and then take a photo of your window with tape measure in a frame and email it over to bill@lightpollutionnews.com, or you can tag us on Instagram. I'm interested in seeing how your experiences match up with what we're going to talk about next. Trying to measure how far that light trespass enters into your bedroom at night. A study out of Urban Climate didn't measure the quantity of light that enters into your bedroom in an urban nighttime environment, but rather how and where the light tended to fall in the room. Anyone living in an urban area is probably well aware of the fact that on unclear nights, the sky brightness is rather significant. It can actually light up your room quite a bit. I speak from experience. Randy, you probably don't have the problem down there in Morgantown, but up here, it's a little brighter at night. But this study is actually looked at sky glow effects on clear nights, which is a little different. It's not as bad here on clear nights, but however, when assessing where that light tended to accumulate on clear nights, they noted, given the typical geometry of a window, the maximum amount of light tended to sit 1 to 2 meters in from the window, not next to the window. The team suggested that city dwellers take advantage of this by placing their sleeping arrangements at a lower level than their windowsill and keeping beds in rooms that view away from the densest part of the urban environment. Rushil, is this something that you experience at all?
Yeah, I think for sure. Like I live in a very urban area. I'm in Northern Virginia, about like 15 minutes out from DC. And even with like blinds, I still get like, I guess like a noticeable glow from like streetlights and from other homes too. So I do think that it's definitely an issue for people living in urban areas.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive the amount that will come in after you kind of darken up and go to bed. You wake up and you see, especially in cloudy nights, man, it's tough. Last month at the American Heart Association Scientific Sessions, the 2025 conference, Dr. Shady Abou-Hashim presented a study abstract of an observational study that looked at 450 healthy adults who live in the Boston area for a time span of 10 years. During that time, researchers from the Massachusetts General Hospital assessed the participants utilizing a generalized model of light at night exposure based on satellite data. The effects appeared to be that for each increase in a standard deviation of light exposure, definition of what entails a standard deviation wasn't noted here. However, individuals had a 35% higher risk of heart disease over 5 years and a 22% higher risk over 10 years. Through to the follow-up period, 17% of the participants experienced major heart problems. I will note that the study has not been peer-reviewed and has thus not been published that I am aware of. Dr. Abou-Hashim suggested that the brain may be perceiving stress and thus triggering an immune response, potentially inflaming blood vessels over time. Last year, had Dr. Mary Mata on alongside Glenn Heinmiller, which is a lighting designer, and Glenn drilled Mata on the validity of the science around health. Dr. Mata's response was that despite not having a golden study at the time proving exterior artificial lighting's effect on human health, He argued that there's preponderance of research that painted the overall linkage. Since we've had that show, it's been a couple of studies that have come out that have been more impactful and more firm. Randy, what do you see in the indoor space? Is there significant research on artificial light from inside the bedroom that has negative impacts on people's physical or mental health?
Absolutely. So the issue, and maybe this is what I didn't hear that episode, what the argument was similar to the one about the correlation between smoking cigarettes and lung cancer, right? It's a correlation, and that's what you could always point to. So we have this strong correlation between exposure to light at night and a variety of diseases. So cancer of the reproductive functions, breast cancer, testicular cancer, ovarian cancer, and so on, and pancreatic cancer outside reproduction all go up with higher levels of light at night. If you want to look at the canary in the coal mine, you just look at the night shift workers who work night shifts, get exposed to light at night, and they're at elevated risk for all sorts of disorders, including heart troubles, stroke, metabolic disorders, diabetes, obesity, and mood disorders like anxiety disorders and depression. So we have all these correlations, but correlation is not causation, right? It's just an association. So that's why we have to take the research to non-human animals to establish causation. And there's been a lot of studies showing that light at night disrupts circadian rhythms, which leads to all of those disorders when examined.
I feel like some of the media gets us. I see a lot of stuff out there, a lot of articles that come through on circadian issues related to artificial light at night, but it doesn't seem to be something that policymakers seem to care about.
To me, it's astonishing, I got to tell you. So, yes, you were right. It's absolutely the case that policymakers are just now getting involved in this. We have some clinical trials going on right now with patients in critical care units, right? Here's a place you're supposed to be healing, and the lights are on all night, so folks can't sleep, and there's all kinds of dysregulation of their immune function and all these other things. And so we've been trying to run these trials where the patients are wearing goggles that screen out the low wavelength light, the bluish light, and see if they have better outcomes, discharge earlier, get better sleep, blah, blah, blah. So I think people are starting to pay attention to this a little bit, but I think the convenience just, we like convenience. And being able to play a video game at night, that's cool, right? My son certainly did it. The cobbler's kids had no shoes. And being able to watch Netflix at night and doing all these things that have just become convenient, it's going to be hard to get people out of those kinds of habits. And, if you take the long view of having electric light, okay, what is it, 140 years since my childhood hero, Thomas Alva Edison, came up with this contraption, but it was accepted whole cloth without thinking at all about any biological effects this might have. And it's really taken 100 years of experiencing light that we started saying, hey, wait a minute, maybe this isn't all great. But it had huge influences on security, as we talked about, but it also had huge benefits economically of allowing night shift work. And so that drove a lot of economic development. And so you say, hey, we're not going to do that anymore. I think we'll hear from Scott that you can do things with lights to make them less problematic. And so I think that's going to be what's going to happen in the next decade, if I had to guess.
When I go to an Airbnb now, actually, I was just thinking about this today. We have to go down to Tennessee this upcoming week. And Caitlin, my wife, told me to remind me to get the eye mask, because whenever you travel, when you stay anywhere, be an Airbnb or be in a hotel, it's a miserable experience in the room. You always have stupid indicator lights, or the air freshener has a light, or there's always something going on. I guess that's a commercial ad, like the value added is that, look, this one lights up and changes color at night, or some dumb thing like that. But is there anything out there that is like a certification for, circadian healthy nightlight, or something like that? Does that exist out there?
I think so. I think a dim, long wavelength light would be good. So sort of something peachy colored wouldn't interfere with circadian rhythm. So I don't know to the extent that people appreciate how the internal rhythms, which run about 24 hours, right? That's the circa part, circadius, that they get set to be 24 hours exactly every day, early in the day by exposure to full spectrum light, being outside. And it's the short wavelength light that we have receptors in our eyes that go back to our clock, which says, hey, this is light now, reset to 24 hours. And that's good. Now, what happens with light at night, of course, is that you're resetting all the time. So, if I put us all in a cave, separate caves, we would run about 24 hours and 20 minutes. That's the natural free running circadian rhythm. But if you get that bright bluish light early in the day, that's what sets it to 24 hours, right? So if you're seeing light at night, you're resetting your clock all night, or as long as you're looking at it, and things get out of whack and are not aligned and optimized. Similarly, and people don't talk about this as much as the light at night because it's so concrete, is you need bright light during the day, right? So you want to sleep well, go outside in the morning. That'll help a lot. Frankly, people are just starting to report on that part of it. So I think that anything that avoids bluish light. Now, unfortunately, all of our devices are mostly blue light. Our TVs, our computer screens, our phones, our iPads, all that stuff is blue and are in incandescent lights, or the compact fluorescent lights that we all have to buy. Those tend to be bluish because they're energy efficient, or more energy efficient. So we get a lot of blue light. So to the extent that we can avoid that, that's fine. My kids who liked to game when they were teenagers had gamer goggles, and they were yellow, and they tended, if you got expensive ones, they tend to get rid of the blue light coming right in the eyes. It's not ideal, obviously. I was in Japan recently, and they had what I consider to be a very cool setup circadian rhythm wise, right? So like at night, if you got out of the bed to go to the bathroom, your foot hit the ground, lights came on along the floor, yellowish lights leading to the bathroom, right? And then you come back and no white light or blue light came on. It was very dim yellow light. Early in the morning, the lights by the bed would start to increase in intensity. And, he sort of woke up naturally, and it was much bluer. So I thought that was a cool system. I mean, I don't know if they did that deliberately or if it came as a system or they just got components or what, but I like that idea.
What is it that they say? Japan, you're living in the future in Japan, right?
Yeah, maybe so.
Tunable white lighting, circadian interior lighting for commercial buildings is available now, and I think that's going to continue to grow. That's something that's clearly a trend.
Yeah, I see that trend in the news. And, that's kind of the thing with the building that we spoke about in the beginning of the show, whereby that they had instituted, and one of the big selling points is circadian lighting inside the building, which, ironically enough, for that building, is that they have a system such as an advanced recognition of that at some point, some level. Randy, you're talking about the bright light in the morning. And I'll often ride downtown before the sun rises. As the sun comes up, when it's that time of year, when it's synced up, where the sun is going to be kind of, I want to say, close to my eyes in the morning, or it's like just in my eyes, you really do feel a difference. You do, your body, at least I think my body does feel a difference. It does feel a little sharper, more kind of in tune, I guess, more ready to go.
Yeah, I think the problem for those of us living in north temperate or south temperate latitudes, I think we're recording this on the winter solstice, so days are going to start getting longer tomorrow. So that's good news for us. But it's hard. I mean, I leave for work. It's dark. At 7 a.m., it's dark here. And I get to work and I'm in my office. It has 160 lux. I've measured it. That's not really enough to set my clock properly. And then I go home in the dark. So likely, I'm free running. Now, I often take a melatonin supplement at night. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not recommending your listeners do this. Check with your own doctors. But that helps to reset for me. And so I can maintain a decent sleep thing. But you can buy devices. We have a clinical trial on night shift nurses trying to help them with their circadian rhythms. And they have a visor from Denmark where it puts down blue light in their eyes for 30 minutes. So trying to make it look like it's sunrise for them. It's used for treating seasonal affective disorder instead of the big light boxes. And it's interesting that they claim they're sleeping better, but we haven't finished it, so we haven't published it, obviously.
I wanted to ask you about the melatonin real fast. Are there studies out there showing that melatonin helps? Because I've seen, and I think we have a study coming up on the second show that talks about melatonin on animals. And it seems to negate a lot of these issues, or it seems to reduce a lot of these issues.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you saw there was just a report from a meeting. I think the same meeting, the cardiovascular meeting you cited earlier, showing that melatonin was associated, long-term melatonin use was associated with bad cardiac outcomes. And so people have been saying, well, is that really the melatonin, or is it the fact these people had insomnia and they're taking it incorrectly? They're taking it as a sleep aid rather than a circadian syncing kind of a thing. And so that's opened up some interesting ideas. But mostly there's just a lot of anecdotes, Oh, I know a guy who takes another mg of melatonin per year. He's 87 years old. He takes 87 milligrams of melatonin every night. It's like, Jesus, what's your blood? A sludge of melatonin. But it's an anecdote.
He's living in a cave. He's living in a cave, Randy. Come on.
He's okay. He's living in the South. So in terms of the animal studies, it's interesting to me because a lot of those studies are flawed. And the main reason they're flawed is because they're done on albino mice or rats. And those animals don't have melatonin typically. So, yeah, it's interesting to see kind of results that come out of those kinds of studies because they don't really apply to people in the sense you really have to do them on pigmented animals. And those studies, yeah, they show some interesting effects.
Wow. I didn't realize that they do them on animals that don't have melatonin naturally. So that's a that's a research model flaw right there.
Yeah, that's not a good thing. But yeah, I think melatonin seems to help in terms of getting rid of the effects of light at night on breast cancer. David Blass down in Tulane's done a lot of that work. Russ Ryder at San Antonio has done a lot of that work. Bud Bernard in Philadelphia has done a lot of that work.
Okay, let me move forward a little bit here. A study came from BMC Public Health that looked at 391,000 individuals between 37 to 73 years of age from the UK Biobank data. The study filtered out individuals with pre-existing health concerns, including diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. The goal was to assess exterior light pollution levels. They utilized a general nighttime brightness assessment via satellite data. The results found that folks with the brightest nights were exposed to 17 times more light at night outdoors than the lowest group. Of that brightest night cohort, cardiometabolic disease incidence rose by 7 to 11%. If an individual had contracted one disease, those living in the brightest nights had an increased risk for developing a second disease by 8 to 16%. Overall, researchers tried to pin a more intense light exposure to the higher risk of developing multiple disease. For you at home, the key takeaway may not be understanding those percentages, but rather, while the team did their best for confounding variables, other unstudied factors probably played into this as well. And this goes back to what we spoke about earlier when we're talking about trying to find that just seeing a correlation, but not really being able to dig out the root cause, right, Randy?
Right. That's the problem. That's a problem with doing human research, right? In terms of you can get all kinds of correlations.
There's another one here from BMC Public Health, and the team studied 53,000 individuals aged 45 and up across 112 Chinese cities. The study utilized a general assessment of nighttime brightness via satellite data with the hopes of understanding the roles of light pollution and growth of the corresponding digital economy. Think cell phone usage, telecommunications, etc. Researchers found that for all of its benefits, an externality of digital economy is its lagging recognition and management of light pollution's effect on individuals, which they asserted, rather vaguely I might add, that harms cognition. The study did test individuals for their cognitive abilities, but in my estimation, they probably tried to cross a bridge too wide here for the data gap and for the analytical design. That was an interesting one. I think something we spoke about earlier right now about, the video game usage at night. Like I was a kid, I played video games at night, and I can't say I slept well. I don't think I slept well really at all as in my teens and parts of my 20s. But, I think that's a part of life that you got the energy, right? Randy, do you need that much sleep? Do you need to be more in tune with your circadian rhythm at a younger age? Or can you kind of skate by through exercise and through, doing certain things?
Yes, you should be attuned to the circadian rhythms. Again, I think it's fundamental aspect, just like homeostasis is a fundamental aspect of biology. If you think about the evolution of life on this planet for the past 3 to 4 billion years, life evolved under bright skies during the day and dark nights. Okay. And we internalize this solar day with our biological rhythms. And so all that time being condensed in our bodies, the arrogance that we can just say after the past 140 years is sort of astounding to me. But with that said, I think kids are interesting in their circadian rhythm because they start off as sleeping most of the time. And then as they become teens, they start sleeping less and they phase shift later, right? They go to bed later, they get up later. That's just natural. That's not video games. That's just the way that adolescents develop sleep patterns. And they tend to become night owls as a chronotype, right? The evening type. And it stays that way and through college. And then into the 30s, it becomes more balanced, partially night owls, partially evening phenotype. And then when you get to be, let's say, my age, you shift the other direction, become a morning lark, right? And it's interesting to watch it happen. Even when you know it's going to happen, you tend to get up earlier. They have early bird specials at the restaurants in Florida, 4 p.m. Let's have dinner. And so people tend to be phase advance as they age. So kids need to know about this because I've testified a bunch of times when you got to have later start times for school, particularly high schools, because kids aren't awake then. It's not because they're doing social media. That doesn't help. It's not because they're gaming. It doesn't help. But rather, it's because of a natural transition to become night owls under chronotype. The light at night doesn't help that. I can tell you that.
Since we're here talking about some of these more technical pieces, the LED lights these days utilize a focus bandwidth of light. Is there anything to this popular perception that LED lights could be unhealthy?
Is there anything to it? Of course. I think there's something to it, right?
I want to ask Randy real fast. Is there anything in the science that is telling us that these LED lights are?
Yes. I mean, again, because most of the LED lights now are short wavelength light, right, Scott?
It's moving thankfully it's moving the other direction, but yes, the vast majority still have a lot of blue in them.
But even if with that blue, it's still just like a coating on top of the blue, right? To get to these.
Yes, phosphorus on top of the blue LED as a base source. Yeah.
Right. You don't have any infrared. You don't have any traditional.
Direct emission amber is the one that is not that way, right? There's a direct emission amber LEDs available and other colored LEDs available, but the vast majority, the ones that are white light or near white light, are blue with phosphorus.
When you were in France, did you notice the headlights? Were those LED, the yellow type LEDs? They seem to be a casual observation. The streetlights as well.
I didn't. We were only traveling by train and bus, and so I didn't have hardly any time on a road, so I didn't notice that. That's an interesting. That's interesting to think about. They're selling different headlights in France, in particular.
They have warm headlights.
Yeah, they're yellowish.
And they're LEDs?
I thought so.
They're not halogens. They're not the older style. Okay.
Might be halogen. I don't know.
Okay.
I just noticed the colors last time.
Wow. That's the most common comment I get from every talk I give is headlights. Every single time I talk, somebody brings up headlights, universally.
There was a piece that came out a little while back talking about the warm headlights because they cut through typical things like fog, rain, snow better when it's coming down. The moisture.
Less scatter, right? Less scatter in the atmosphere. Less
scatter on it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's why fog lights were always yellow. Even when headlights were halogens, the fog lights are always a more yellow frequency. So, yeah.
That's pretty interesting. I did not know. Well, I'll have to look in. Randy, I had no idea. I might have to look into this and see what's going on with the lighting on the headlights out there in France. It sounds, maybe France is living in the future and it's not Japan. I don't know.
Maybe so. I'm thinking the same thing. Yeah.
All right. Well, switching gears to something in our cultural items. There was a study that came out this past fall by researchers at York St. John University who looked at how participants' attitudes were, if at all, affected by dark sky festivals. They sampled 94 visitors along with 8 small business folks who helped organize the event and 2 park officials from North York Moors National Park in England. They specifically looked at their experiences in one of the following activities: a moorland walk, an outdoor stargazing session, an indoor observatory session, and a moorland walk with silent disco. Silent disco, for you at home who may not be aware, it's when you essentially have headphones on and someone is DJing, and it's kind of like a Wi-Fi Bluetooth type setup. The team gathered their data via side-by-side walks with participants using a GoPro cam. So they had individuals walking with them, recording everything, using just a camera somewhere in their body. As it pertains to the visitors, the tourists walked in darkness without flashlights and utilized night vision. The walk was silent. They could hear nature. They weren't really having loud conversations. Participants were reported to be affected by a myriad of different things, including a sense of humility. They said they had a sense of awe, a sense of relief, and a realization of how bright cities were. This is an interesting one, which prompted some to mention that they may look into light pollution mitigation for their house, community, etc. Park officials also referenced that dark sky festivals have evolved from purely a revenue tool into a powerful conservation tool. Now, Randy's kind of stole the show here, but, for everyone here, one participant allegedly is participating in bat surveys, but they're obviously a group of people who are a little more biased sample in going out to a dark sky festival. Have you had any examples of positive tales like this, where people's attitudes or maybe beliefs or recognition that, hey, you know what, I see the night differently, come out of anything that you've done?
Yeah, I think definitely when people see what they're missing out on, they kind of start to understand how big the problem truly is. Even for me personally, I'm really interested in stargazing and looking at the stars with my telescope, and just the fact that living in such an urban area, it's so difficult to do that. But if I travel 100 miles west or south, then it's way easier to actually see the stars, and you can actually see the very 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 pristine dark skies. I think that is it's hugely important in understanding how deep light pollution actually is in urban areas and how much of the experiences that we could have it's kind of just taking away from us.
Yeah, I think that for me personally, that's where my recognition of the importance of dark nights started in college. I worked in Yellowstone National Park for a summer, and even though I grew up in a town of only 8,000 people in rural Iowa, I hadn't really seen the Milky Way in that way. I mean, being at 6,000 feet elevation in a national park was astonishing every night to be able to go out on a clear night and see the stars I did. And that really, I think I mentioned this in the study, you're talking about that sense of awe. And I hope to do this in the area we live in. Because of all the retrofits we've done, I intend to bring public works officials, law enforcement people, electricians, people that I consider planners, people that I consider that can make change at scale, not individuals in their own home, which are important, no doubt, but people that have the ability to make a decision, if I can persuade them, that has an influence over a wider area, a bigger area, bring them out to have that experience in our area, and then give them the tools they need, exactly how to do it, not just the awareness of the problem, but here's how you're going to do the things we're doing back where you live. And I think that sense of turning astrotourism or turning dark sky tourism into a tool, this study you talked about was really, I think, focused on individual behavior. But I really see that as the most effective way to have change at scale.
Do either of you guys or anyone here on the call think that, is this something that is age dependent? I know I had Ben Chappelle, who unfortunately recently passed. He was back on the show, and he mentioned that his in-laws, they didn't understand why he didn't want to have lights outside at his house. But I feel like, Rushil, it's something that I see a lot more young people stepping forward on. Is there something there? Is there an age blockage, some issue regarding how, I guess, people, different generations view this resource of night?
I think it partially maybe. I think younger people are much more kind of aware now of some of the environmental trade-offs of new technology and innovation that's happening globally. And most of it is kind of more on the air and water pollution side. But I think the same concept of being like cautious of what we're putting outside and how that might affect the environment and people's health and things like that. That also extends to light pollution as well. And that might be why like younger people are just more, they like want to get back what they're missing out on. And they want to kind of correct some of the mistakes that have been made over the past few decades.
And so much of growing up in today's world is so much of it is digital. Do young people want to have more natural experiences, or is that just something that, you know, maybe like a group of people do?
I don't know if that's like a generalization of like all young people might want more natural experiences, but I think there's definitely a lot of people who they're using social media and just like their screens so much, especially after the pandemic, where like a lot of like schoolwork is also just digital now, and people are like trying to like go outside more as a result to kind of get away from that. And when they go outside, especially like in the evenings and in the night, they can't experience the dark skies anymore that they maybe could have a few decades ago. And so I think that definitely does play a role as well.
Well, let's stop here. This is great. Before we close out today, I want you at home to check out where my three guests are at. And Scott, where can people find you and learn more things about what's going on?
We have a 501c3 where I try and keep the most relevant information, and that's www.4darkskies. That's a number 4darkskies.org. And that's the website that we maintain to try and drive action. That's the best place to find me.
Randy, where can people learn more about what's going on down in Morgantown?
Well, I just published a book with Oxford University Press called Dark Matters. And so it just came out. It's got a picture of this night sky.
Oh, yeah. It's a little, you have to turn off your background for it. Yep, there it is. Yep.
There it is. Nice.
See this aerial shot. It goes through all of the health issues with having light exposure at night, and then provide some tricks that you can do to spare you from those damaging health effects.
Excellent. Rushil, if folks are interested in joining Princia, how can they sign up and learn more about things you're doing?
Yeah, so Princia's website is on princia.org, and there's a join page there. We welcome any students who are interested in the dark sky movement and in advocating against light pollution to join.
Great. I want to thank my guests once more, and I want to thank you at home for staying with us. Our first show of 2026 is down. Looking forward to many more with you, the listener. Oh, and before we go today, I forgot to mention, I have a big shout out to our new social media coordinators. We have two volunteers stepped up, Laura Taylor and Emily Byers. Really appreciate your assistance. Can't tell you how thankful I am for you guys jumping up and taking the reins on that. As a reminder, Light Pollution News is a listener-supported show. That means we solely survive on the generosity of yourself to help continue to grow the show. And to that point, if you found something in this show that particularly helpful or impactful, why not share it with those in your community who may be benefiting or may benefit from listening to it? Once more, thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Bill McGeaney, reminding you to only shine the light where it's needed.